And welcome to our series, The Five Languages of Work. We hope you have a coffee or having lunch while you're listening. So by way of introduction, my name is Ming, and this is Lydia. Lydia and I met, we worked together at EF. Lydia actually was hired originally in our management trainee program called the 360, and she was assigned to me. I'm very lucky. In her spare time, she was the Harvard rugby team captain of the women's team, and she coaches here in Hong Kong. I am an inveterate marathoner. At EF, our day jobs, I am the Chief Culture Officer at EF, and Lydia is the content and brand manager here in our studio here in Hong Kong. And, we work together on a wonderful team. And we thought, if we had to talk about one thing that we could talk about together, and it would be what it's like to work together and digging into, again, what makes someone good to work with and what makes someone maybe not so good to work with. So before we dive in, we just want to tell you that we want to remind you it takes two people to speak a language. So you have someone who's a giver and someone who is a receiver, and you are both a giver of appreciation and a receiver of appreciation at work. So just keep that in mind as we talk to you about the five languages of work. But first,
yeah, so I wanted to share this analogy that really helped me to understand all of this. And it goes back to climate change, which obviously you don't think of work when you think of climate change. But I think of it as, it's a big buzzword, right? You go on social media and everyone seems to have their own solution, their own tips, their own tricks. It's all over the media these days. And I'm clicking out. Essentially, it could be ride sharing, bicycling. I have a lot of friends doing Meatless Monday now, and a lot of people going even vegan, right? So everyone's got their own way of dealing with this. But I don't know how many of you have seen the new David Attenborough documentary, but he essentially has one solution to climate change. And he says, nature worked out the solution a long time ago. And essentially, in this world, a species can only thrive when everything else around it thrives too. So he's essentially saying that we as humans can only thrive and succeed if we stop killing animals, we stop cutting down trees, and allow everything to thrive as it naturally has done. And when I first heard that, it made me really pause, and I had to go back and watch it because I was like, oh my God, this really applies to so many things in life. It could be work, it could be sports teams. I think it really made me think about how everyone seems to have their own solution for all these other environments. You look at all these buzzword articles across, HBR and Forbes, and it seems like everyone's got it figured out. But really, if you think about it and bring it back to the core, it's quite simple. A species can only thrive when everything else around it thrives too. Meaning, you can only thrive when your team thrives too. And people thrive when they feel appreciated and valued. And we know this because there's been multiple studies done on this, but one that really stood out to me was a recent one that Gallup did. And they looked at the reason that people leave companies. And 79% of people in the survey that they did cited not feeling appreciated as the reason they left. So we're going to work to address that a little bit in this talk.
So when we tried to break it down, we actually, reference this framework called the five languages of love. And when you speak a language, it takes two people. A giver is someone who expresses love, and a receiver is how you feel loved. So, we, excuse the cheesy cover, but we basically, talked about The Languages of Love, which is a best-selling book and framework that Dr. Gary Chapman came up with. If you go to his website, you can take his quiz about what kind of language of love you speak. And it's a really good way to think about how you receive love and how you give love. And he broke it down into five things, which is words of affirmation. Either you like to receive words of affirmation or you like to give words of affirmation. That's how you express, or that's how you feel love. Quality time, acts of service, gift giving, and physical touch. And what was really interesting is when we took our test, we had exactly the right. I like acts of service. She likes doing acts of service.
It was like very complimentary.
So when we think about, well, what does that mean about the 5 languages of work? You know, the 5 languages of love is really useful when you're thinking about how you express it to your partner, or how you express it to your children, or how you express it to your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend. But what about colleagues at work? We spend 80% of our time with our colleagues at work. What is the languages that we speak to them? And again, just to review, at work, you are both a giver and a receiver on how you express appreciation and how you feel appreciated. So actually, Gary Chapman also wrote a book, which is called the 5 Languages of Appreciation in Workplace, which he basically used his same 5 words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, gift giving, and physical touch. And when we discussed it, we decided, okay, gift giving is a no, that's called corruption. And physical touch is also a big no, that's called sexual harassment. So when we were thinking of what would the applicable 5 languages of love be, I think that, you know, words of affirmation, quality time, and acts of service, certainly. And then we had 2 others that we built on.
And we reframed the first 3 in a way that feels a little bit more unique to our experience as well. So we've got praise, connection, humility, long rope, and humor as the 5 that we'll go over today.
So praise, again, this is recognition for work done, which can be written or spoken. In Dr. Gary Chapman's language, it's called words of affirmation. Mm-hmm. And it gives the giver and the receiver a sense that effort went into the work done, and it deserves mentioning, and the recipient feels really, really appreciated. Mm-hmm. You know, tips on how to do this is, you know, send out a call or make a phone call or write an email or give a team shout out at the next meeting. Mm-hmm. You know, praise is super easy, but people usually don't use it.
Mm-hmm. Could be company awards, team awards, something like that.
And, you know, there's a huge power in positive praise. Teachers have seen a 30% increase in their students when they get positive praise for positive behavior. Managers see 60% increase in engagement. So again, in education, the power of praise isn't just praise for praise's sake, but it's actually a method of discipline and behavior rewarding.
And just to look at one case study from business, if you look at how much speaking the right language is actually worth. So JetBlue, which is consistently rated one of the highest companies for both customer and employee satisfaction. So they launched this internal program where employees could give shout outs or like kudos to other employees on their team or maybe globally. And it was all public, so everyone can see it. And what they saw from this was a 3% increase in retention and a 2% increase in engagement. When you think about the cost of hiring a new person, which can range from 20 to 150% of a salary. If you retain just 3% of people, that can actually become tens of millions of dollars in revenue over the course of a time. So it actually can help your business, and they increased customer satisfaction as well through doing this. So all around, everyone was a lot happier.
But we want to point out for praise that not all praise is created equal, right? We actually did this seminar with another group before, and they're like, oh, you know, all of our company shout outs, they had this channel called Woohoo, and all of their shout outs were about someone working really late or going above and beyond. And they said that it really contributed to a toxic workplace culture because they were basically, you know, championing things that made it very difficult to work or deliver. Mm-hmm. So we just want to point out that praise is great, but it's not created all equal. And that you should think about it, and it should feel authentic, but you shouldn't be, it's a method, again, as teachers used it, it's a method of reinforcing behaviors. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to create the wrong behaviors or an unsustainable culture by what you're championing.
And I think the thing to keep in mind here that was brought up before when we were making this PowerPoint is praising the right things, you know, so you can place emphasis on praising aspects of certain things in your culture that you want to continue. You know, if someone works late, you don't praise the fact that they worked late, but you praise the work that was done. And I think a really good point that was brought up before was also championing and praising achievements that people have outside of the workplace. So we're not always just focusing on what's happening at work and creating a toxic workaholic culture sometimes.
Someone actually asked in the chat, what if someone isn't a natural giver of praise? And one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to you about this framework was, again, you need to think about how you are as a giver and how you are as a receiver. And it could be that you really want to hear words of affirmation or praise, but the person that you work with isn't someone who naturally gives it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have tips for people who don't naturally give it. It was pointed out to us, this website that generates random compliments for you. When I typed in compliments, it said, I bet you sweat, Lydia. I bet you sweat glitter.
Oh.
Or she could be saying, Ming, your voice is magnificent. But if you run out of compliments, you can go to generatormix.com for the random compliment generator.
So the second one is connection. And I think this one's quite obvious, but it's one-on-one time. And I think the significant thing here is that you feel like you're getting the sense of undivided attention from the giver in this case. And this could be maybe going out for a coffee chat or getting lunch or doing something outside of work with each other. But it really feels like, the person is there and they're present with you. And that's what's important to emphasize here. So there was an article that came out recently that apparently said 6 hours with your direct leader can lead people to be 29% more inspired at work, 30% more engaged, 16% more innovative, and 15% more intrinsically motivated. And they'd found this 6 hour sweet spot somehow. So Ming and I were joking last week because we ran a marathon together, and I was like, Ming, we spent almost 6 hours. That was like our quota for the week.
Again, that's a good point, is that quality time or does not have to happen necessarily only at the office. Like, I know for myself, I spend so much time at the office. The last thing I want to do is like go eat lunch with some of my colleagues. No offense to you. So it can be, but actually the colleagues will go running or do something. Know that not all people, like, I wouldn't say quality time is one of the things that I need for feeling appreciated.
Yeah. You kind of have to meet people where they are as well, I think,
So the third language of work would be humility. And again, Dr. Gary Chapman, in his Languages of Love, calls this acts of service. And what it is getting into the trenches. Leaders are not above any type of work. It really gives a culture of sense of flatness and a feeling of authentic leadership.
So I had to bring in a rugby reference because that's actually where I first learned about this term sweep the sheds when I was in college, and we had to read this book Legacy, which is kind of business lessons from the All Blacks. And essentially they looked at this 10-year period that they had where they were extremely successful and had a 92% win rate over this period, coming out of a not so great period where they weren't really winning, and completely shaped their team culture. And there are 5 key lessons that were brought out from that time. And one of which really resonated with me is this concept of sweep the sheds, which means that the team leaders, the team captains aren't above anyone else. It's truly a culture of humility, and they literally stay after trainings and after games to help sweep the sheds. And it's this beautiful equation that they put together, which is that performance and success in a sports arena is both capability, so having the skills, but also character and being a good person and kind of leading from the trenches, as Ming said. So you're not bigger than the team or bigger than anyone else. And that actually led to a lot of success for them over their period.
So yeah, so humility really creates a greater sense of trust and transparency and camaraderie in a team. So the fourth language of love of work, which we did not take from Dr. Gary Chapman, is a long rope. And what this means is freedom and responsibility to take ownership. This is how some people like to feel like they are appreciated. And this is some ways that givers give as recognition to people. So what is a long rope? Again, it's like, not being a micromanager.
I think, getting tasked with something where you feel like, oh, this is something really important. Maybe you get to sit in on a big meeting where there's lots of important people there, and you feel like you're sort of trusted with this responsibility. And the positive side of that is something that Carol Dweck coined, which is growth mindset, which is really when people thrive in situations that are challenging, that push them out of their comfort zone. These are people that aren't afraid of failure and will really thrive when given long rope, because they see each opportunity or each task that they're given as a way of growing and a way of learning, kind of no matter the outcome, and are really motivated by that. And then I think on the negative side of this, we have imposter syndrome and micromanagement, which Ming will talk about a little.
So the negative of giving someone a very long rope would be that oftentimes people might feel like they're promoted or given a task that's too big for them, or they're not up for it, or they're too young. And that's imposter syndrome. So the other one is micromanagement, which is people who only give you a short rope and they micromanage you. And that's a classic example of really a miscommunication. Oftentimes when people micromanage, either they feel very insecure, they're probably used to being a productive learner and having the long rope themselves. Therefore, they give you a very short rope and they can't delegate. So again, by recognizing that some people don't have a long rope or some people only give long ropes, it might help you recognize what you need at work or what you need to talk to somebody about.
The last one.
The last one we love is humor. And again, this makes the hard stuff easier. I don't know about you, but we've had a terrible year last year, pretty bad. And I think that we wouldn't have, gotten by without being able to laugh. And it's also, makes challenges we've had. I know some of you work at EF. I think that you know what it's like during the summer when you have tons of kids departing for one of our programs. It's crazy, but there's a lot of laughter involved, and it's helps make people up for the challenge. And it gives you a sense of lightheartedness, which is wonderful to work with. And some people really love that.
And coincidentally, I was scrolling through Instagram the other day and this article came up and I was like, oh, Ming, we have to put this in the presentation. Basically was all about humor and leaders who have a sense of humor, and especially emphasis even during this time when the world is so crazy, how you kind of just have to laugh sometimes. But it said that leaders who have a sense of humor were 27% more motivating, 15% more engaged, and ran teams that were 2 times more likely to solve a creativity challenge. So this is how people saw their leaders, right? More motivating, more engaged. And I think that's quite telling, that especially even during these times, having a sense of humor can go a long way. And then obviously the sort of negative side of this that we were talking about even earlier today is toxic positivity, right? When you have someone who is so focused on staying positive that they can often overlook very real and it's hard, right? Like life gets hard sometimes. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that and not be positive. And sometimes humor can overlook that. So that can be the bad side of it, especially now more than ever. So we're going to do a quick poll now that we've gone over the 5.
So there are nearly 300 of you coming from all over the world. We'd love you to just type. We're going to launch this poll to see which language of love do you speak at work, i.e. as a giver, how do you express appreciation for your colleagues at work? Do you give praise? Do you primarily think about connection or spending quality time? Do you roll up your sleeves and get in there? Is it humility? Or do you show people appreciation by giving them a long rope, a long runway to run with their own projects, i.e. you do not micromanage? Or do you really show appreciation through making jokes? So again, we'd love to hear what you guys say. We're getting the votes tallied. Thanks for voting. Again, how do you give appreciation? Connect quality time, spending time with people. That's interesting because during COVID, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, I would say for this one, in terms of expressing, Ming mentioned it before, but I definitely think humility or acts of service is quite a big one for me. And then connection. I really enjoy feeling like I'm close to my colleagues because we're sort of in it together and going through this hard thing together and really, bonded over it. That might be the inner rugby player in me who just, when you go out with your team, you just, rugby games are challenging. And I think you come out stronger when you're in it together. And I feel closer with people that way. So I think definitely humility and connection are the way that I would speak.
So 90% of you have almost voted. I don't know whether they can see the results.
I'll share it. Actually, it's quite interesting. So I'll end it because 90% is a lot. So
So 90%.
You guys can see. So connection is actually the biggest one.
At 49%, nearly half of you say that you show appreciation by spending time or connecting with your colleagues. I wonder if a lot of you are in sales.
or have had a hard time this year, or have gotten really creative with how you've managed to stay connected.
The next one is humor. 42% of you guys give appreciation through making jokes or keeping it light. The next one is 40% of you use praise or words of affirmation to show appreciation. 32% of you go, roll up your sleeves and are humble. And 16% of you give a long rope. So thank you for taking that poll. We're going to do the next poll.
We'll do another one. So now we're going to answer, what language do you like to hear at work? So this is different than you expressing, but it's how do you feel appreciated? And we will do this one.
So again,
so you guys can fill in that one. So this is, how do you feel appreciated at work? It could be from your manager. It could be from, a head of your company, someone else on your team. But praise, maybe you would really enjoy when you get credit for a successful project or hearing a shout out from others. Connection, maybe you find it really motivating to spend time with your teammates. Humility, if you feel appreciated knowing that someone has really gone out of their way to help you. Long rope. Oh, these are actually switched. So the description for long rope is on the other side. So do you prefer operating with limited structure and support to meet big goals? And then humor would be, do you thrive in a lighthearted environment? So we'll let the polls come in again.
The polls are coming in. 75% of you are voting now. So we're just going to wait till we get to 90%. So if you can put in your vote on how do you feel appreciated? Super interesting, actually, because it shows that the way you give it is not the way that you're receiving it.
This is actually really interesting.
Because only 20% of you actually said that you feel appreciated through connection, whereas 49% of you said you give appreciation through connection.
Yeah, I actually think when we were putting this together, we had this realization, as Ming mentioned, that we were quite compatible.
Okay, you can share it now.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So the number one of how you gave it and how you received it, it's actually not.
I think you guys should be able to see it now. So praise is the number one thing that people like to hear, which is consistent with what happened the last time we did this presentation as well. And there actually was another HBR article recently that said this, that there's a disconnect between people who want praise and people who give praise, and that actually we're underestimating the amount of praise that people want. So
hopefully after this call, you thank someone or you give them positive reinforcement of a colleague that you really appreciate, because chances are that's what they need to hear. Connection is only 20%, but all of you guys, half of you said that that's a way that you express appreciation, but less than 20% or 20% of you feel appreciated that way. Humility, interesting. Long rope, 24% of you guys, a quarter of you want a long rope.
Yeah, even though long rope was the lowest on the other one, which is interesting. I would put myself in long rope as well, definitely, as the language that I like, which is great because Ming gives me a lot of it.
And humor is only 7%. So thank you guys for
sharing.
Yeah.
All right.
So what now?
Yeah. How to wrap it all up.
So again, this is just the 5 languages of work is something that we took from Dr. Gary Chapman and we made it into our own language, but it's a format for you to figure out what you're like as a manager, a colleague, or a mentor. So again, when you don't get along with somebody at work, it might not be because of that person's personality. It could be that you guys are speaking completely different languages. The way that person needs to be appreciated or feels it or gives appreciation could be very different from the way you truly feel appreciated or the way that you give appreciation. So it's just, again, this is just a framework. You might have a different language that you want to add, but just it's a way to evaluate how you're working relationships. It's also, again, a way of dealing with difficult people or situations at work, because you might be like, oh, why is this person like so controlling, or oh, he's so annoying. But it could be because they're like totally not on your page or not speaking even remotely the same language. And also, it's just a reminder to spend time with people who add value to your life. Say thank you, or, give them a pat on the back. Thank you, Lydia, for doing this presentation.
I think it's also a way to realize too that everyone that you have relationships with can add value into your life. And even if you don't feel it in a certain moment because of maybe the conflicts that Ming was mentioning, you can learn to speak the same language and then create a situation where everyone is adding value into your life. And I think we already mentioned this, but you're not going to get along with everybody. But that's not because there's something wrong with you or them. It's just that you're on different pages. And I think what we found through doing this is that our lights just went off in the office.
That's weird. Okay.
When
they
people
really don't think we're here now. We look like ghosts.
When people feel valued, they work harder, they're more invested, think more creatively, are more productive, definitely happier, all of those positive things that we want, that really just contribute to team growth and teams thriving. And obviously when teams thrive, companies will thrive. So it's this great ecosystem, to bring it back to David Attenborough at the beginning, of everything coming in sync. So we'll just kind of end with this quite quickly. So how do you learn another language, right? We've gone through all of these, and maybe there's one that you're not so great at, and you've acknowledged that you've got one that's stronger. So I think definitely know what language you want to speak and you want to learn, and then putting the effort. I, for one, am not so great at praise or words of affirmation, because on a personal level, I don't always see the value of it. Because I'm like, well, why would someone tell me something I'm doing well? Like, I want to grow. I want to, know the things that I need to work on. And so I have to do a conscious job at working to put in the effort to grow on that side. And as Ming mentioned at the beginning, it's not just about you. It takes two to speak a language. So really get to know the person who's on the other side of what you're trying to learn. And
you don't need to be fluent to communicate, but you need to know the basics. Again, just having a framework. You don't have to follow R5, but there are different ways that people feel appreciated and different ways that people give appreciation.
Mm-hmm. Most people only speak the language they know or they're born speaking, and there's always some that we're better at. So that's why feedback is a gift. And I think here it's important to keep in mind that you have a culture within your team where people feel comfortable giving feedback. They know that they can come to you and talk if something's not working. You can express how you want to be spoken to and things like that. And so that's just sort of a team culture thing. And another one is, listen to how others speak. I've had the opportunity to be under some great mentors in my life, both in work and in the sports world. And I think everything that I've learned and adapted into myself has come from listening and watching others and just picking up on behaviors that I really admire. So that's another tip. And then just to end, so there are about 7,000 languages in the world, and we've talked about only 5 here at work, but there are definitely more.
And maybe you guys have ideas about which other ones that you
can share in the chat if you guys have some. We'll look through it later as well. That can help us improve this. But
R5 are praise, connection, humility, long rope, and humor. So thank you for joining us. I know a bunch of you asked whether we're going to be sharing this presentation. Mm-hmm. We're going to be uploading it on LinkedIn.
We'll put it on the EF YouTube page, actually. It should be up in the next couple of days as soon as I can cut the recording.
And some of you asked for the PowerPoint, which we're going to put that up.
I think, the PowerPoint should be in the recording if everything went as planned. So it should be there, and it should be emailed out to everyone who registered within the next couple of days.
Yes. So thank you guys for joining.
We'll look through some of the questions now and do Q&A for a little bit. So if you guys have any questions, put into the Q&A. I think it's a little bit easier to read than the chat, and we can see it better. I'm just through.
We're not going to be sharing this presentation through email. We'll post it on our YouTube page and on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. We on Lydia and I's individual LinkedIn, if not the EF LinkedIn. If you're not praised or valued, how to tackle that situation. I think those are two separate things. Some people might not give you praise, but value comes from maybe feeling like you're underpaid, or valued is that you weren't given a long enough rope. Mm-hmm. So you need to tease out, how do you not feel valued? I can't decode the word and innovate. Can you? Pratam.
Yeah.
And then have you responded to issues raised about the sense of unfinished when appreciation is expressed differently in the team for each individual from the leader? Oh, like favoritism? Yeah, it's pretty tough. We've not addressed that.
That's a good one to add, I would say.
Yeah. How, one thing is that you can point out to your leader that their language of love might be, or their language of work might be praise, and it's not evenly distributed. So, I mean, maybe you can take your boss through this. Yeah, you're completely welcome to take this through with your teams.
Yeah, we did this a couple weeks ago for a different organization, and then they said they all sat down afterwards and went through with their teams, which language they wanted, and because they realized there was that disconnect where they had this, they all were craving praise, basically was what came out of that talk, and not getting it, and so they're actually working on changing the company and adding in a system where they've got praise there.
And then would you add integrity as a professional language? I don't think I think it's honesty is a behavior. It's not necessarily a language. Like, or you could say integrity to me means like, you don't cheat. You're true to your word.
I do think a lot of young people value integrity. I think if I understand what you mean by it, Petter, maybe it's people sort of practicing what they preach, right? Where someone says something and then stay true to that. And I do think people do value that, but I don't know necessarily if that would trickle down to someone feeling valued. It's more of a respect for that person, maybe. What would you say?
I think that it could be one of the languages, but it definitely seems like a behavior, not a language. Someone said, what are practical ideas or ways for managers to identify these work languages in their teams? Do a team brainstorm, talk to people. Don't only do it within your team, talk to other people within different products or across your organization, across functions, and say, what are ways in our company or our organization that we feel like we have that we talk to each other with? And if you feel like you work in a toxic environment, it could be that you have really negative languages.
And I mean, we did just talk a lot about speaking and talking, but honestly, for me, I think the most practical thing to do is just watch people and observe. And people tend to give you cues if there's something they like or if they don't like. And you can just, there's sort of subtle ways of picking up on all of that, and just see how someone responds when you, praise them, or if you ask them out for a coffee. And, there's ways that you can pick up on that, I think, without being so deliberate sometimes as well.
So Olivia is talking about how humor and praise are more culture-based care, while humility and long rope are more individual-based. If so, how do teams foster the humility and long rope on a larger cultural level? So
EF is quite good at the long rope, right?
I think the humility and the long rope, I think leaders show that. Right. And if you have, I know at EF, the person who has set the tone, I'm the chief culture officer, but I think it's only because I've actually worked with Bertel, who was our founder, who, definitely rolled up his sleeves. He goes and checks like storerooms to make sure that they're neat, or we'll open desk drawers to make sure they're tidy. Like that's okay. It's not, it could be called like, totally, obsessive compulsive neat, but it's also just attention to detail and humility. Like he's not too important to be above any little small detail. And that's what rolling up your sleeves is about, and being on top of things. And in terms of long rope, that is also set, I think, at a leadership level, and a management level. So if you, have people who report to you, or you have a team that you have to divide tasks, then keep that in mind. It actually builds a wonderful culture. I can definitely recommend it.
Let's see. I think those are all the questions, unless there's a couple more.
Is this line of control between humility and hostility? Oh, is there a line of control between humility and hostility?
I'm not sure I understand the connection as much.
I don't get that.
Maybe elaborate a little more.
And then are there any other wonderful languages that you could teach us in the future?
Yeah, if you guys have any suggestions, put them in the chat. I'll look through it later and see what we can pull out. Honestly, the two that we added were because Ming and I were sitting there and we were like, these don't really relate exactly to what we like to receive. So the long rope one came from me, and then the humor one came from Ming. So there's definitely many, many more out there. Any other questions?
But thank you again for joining us. And again, you can find this deck and this recording on our LinkedIn
Mhm.
and on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll share it. Should be emailed out within the coming days as well to everyone who's registered, and then we'll live forever on our YouTube page. But definitely follow us, follow EF on LinkedIn, follow both of us. I think Ming's probably a lot more interesting than I am.
No,
but
no. But
trying to up my game a bit.
thank you for joining us. Good night. Good night.